Hey, I'm Bennie Crawford, and today we're going to be talking about a book. Well, not a book, but we're going to be talking about assimilation. Assimilation is a word that we use to describe how different people from different cultures and different backgrounds and different customs, how they can come to different countries and go to different countries and then be assimilated into that country, or be accepted into that country, or be made a part of the cultures, bringing them in. So assimilation deals with cultures and making people one with the culture, and understanding how customs go and how backgrounds are, and making them a part of another country other than the one they were. And that's what happens with assimilation. So today we're going to be discussing some things when it comes to assimilation, and in order to explain how assimilation works, I found a book that may explain it just the way we can actually use it, and how we could build upon a system. And that book is Fusion. Fusion was written by Nelson Searcy. Nelson Searcy, he came up with this book, and it describes a system of assimilating someone into a culture, or an organization. He created that system, and he actually started a church in New York City, and he called that church The Journey. And he called it The Journey because in assimilating someone, he said that there is a journey. There's a journey that they go through whenever you're trying to build your organization. And so he creates this system, and he talks about that system. And he basically says that someone in his church, if they go from being a first-time guest to being a regular attendee and a core member. So that's basically what Nelson talks about. And he does it in Fusion. Now, let's talk about Fusion just a little bit. Fusion it's a little different from assimilation. Fusion is taking two separate things, putting them together, and fusing them together and making them one. That's what fusion does. And once you fuse them, he basically says that you can't separate them. That's what he says when it comes to, and he used that word in order to explain assimilation. I think he does a great job at it in this book, Fusion. And we're going to go through it and kind of go over some things. So in chapter 1, Nelson talks about the power of assimilation. What is the power of assimilation? And he describes that a first-time guest, in assimilating a first-time guest, someone comes to your church as a guest, what they're bringing to your church is they're bringing different ideas. They're bringing different types of, they're bringing different spiritual gifts. They're bringing different perspectives on how to do things into the body that you attend. And he said that's the power of assimilation. If you do this right, they bring things that's needed into the church. And he does a great job at explaining that. And he says, in assimilation, these new faces actually can become core members of their church, where they're taking on responsibilities, and they're actually moving forward in helping your church grow. And remember, one thing I want you to think about, I say remember, but one thing I want you to think about is that when someone comes to your church, it doesn't necessarily mean that they're saved. They're saved. So, however, they still go through the assimilation process. Someone may join your church and not get saved until they've already been attending there for a little while. Yes, think about that. See, the assimilation process doesn't start when they get saved. The assimilation process starts when they come to your church the first time. And if you're not looking at that, and if you're not thinking about that, you can actually push people away instead of bringing them in. And we want to make sure that we embrace the people of God, no matter who they are. They don't have to be saved in order to still be people of God. Now, they will make changes in their lives and become saved sooner or later once they are assimilated into the culture. See, now they're coming to learn. And in The Power of Assimilation, in that chapter, he talks about how first-time guests are able to come and be a part of your church. So it is not enough to do your best. You must know what to do, and then you can do your best. And he used that. That's a quote from Edward Demings. And in that chapter there, he talks about doing your best. Some of us start trying to assimilate people, and we don't know we're doing that. So then what happens is we end up doing it wrong when it comes to assimilation. So that I think that chapter is very good. Should actually read it. So biblical hospitality is chapter 2. Biblical hospitality. This chapter deals with purpose and preparation. If you have a guest come into your house, then you actually prepare for them. So what are you doing in your church? What are you doing in your organization? Are you preparing for new guests? Well, this chapter talks about preparing for them. And there are some things that you should do in order to prepare for them. You should create a system. You should know what your purpose is. See, Jesus had a purpose as well. He said, I came to serve. That's what he said. I came to serve. And so if you know that there's a system, the system is in 3 phases. And Nelson talks about it in this chapter here. He says that the first phase is the first-time guest. It's to turn the first-time guest into a second-time guest. That's the first phase. Second phase is to turn the second-time guest into a regular attendee. Third is to turn a regular attendee into a core member. That's the phases that he says that you go through when people are coming to the church. Chapter 3 deals with 7 minutes and counting. 7 minutes and counting. This is all about impression. People get an impression of your organization within 7 minutes of getting there. Now, I know you think it's 7 minutes of them getting inside of the church. However, the 7 minutes doesn't start there. It actually starts in the parking lot. So how do you give a great first impression? Knowing that impressions it's an instinct. It's things that people think of subconsciously. Impressions is not something that you think of when you come to someone's church. You're not going there to get that. It's just what happens when you're there. So that actually happens within the first 7 minutes. So it's best to start smiling. Greet them. He puts it in 4 components in that chapter, in 7 minutes and counting. He says that they're greeted properly, they're directed properly. So we're telling them exactly where they need to go. He gives you strategies for that. He says they're treated properly while they're there, and they're seated properly. Those are the 4 components of getting the first impression, of them getting their first impression. And this, we can make a difference right there. Chapter 4 speaks of making contact. Making contact. Now, there's a quote that the art of communication is the language of leadership. And basically what that says is you must communicate with someone. Now, you have a first-time guest come to your church. If you don't find a way to communicate with them, then guess what? You may never see them again. So there are strategies for building avenues for communicating with first-time guests. And Nelson actually goes through that and talks about those things. Just getting their contact information, communicating. Also, you must not only get their information, they should also be getting your information. Get your information. They need your information as well. So that when they go home, some of the decisions are made right there. See, people usually don't make decisions there. They make them when they're alone and they can think about what happened the next day because they are thinking about it. So that's what it occurs. In chapter 5, he says creating fans through follow-up. Now, someone comes to your church or to your organization and they enjoyed themselves. Now it's time to follow up. So where does follow-up start? Follow-ups should be fast, friendly, and functional, Nelson says. Fast, friendly, and functional. So it should start right after service. First follow-up is you should have an information desk or guest table. Get them to the table so that you can actually share with them. Let them know that you will be contacting them just to see if it's anything that you could do for them, or just so that they can possibly do a survey and tell you what you could do different. You can ask them a few questions and tell them, hey, you won't be long. You're not being pushy. So it should be, first off, fast. Now you're letting them know that it's going to be friendly. We're not trying to force you to come here because your organization may not be for everyone. So in the first 36 hours, we're going to send out our first response by mail. We got them at the guest table. First 36 hours, we send them an email. And the email is friendly. I'm just asking them what they thought. Then in 96 hours, we're going to send either a handwritten note or we're going to send a card handwritten to them. Just asking them, hey, how was your service? Nelson says, not Nelson, but David Fry, who Nelson quotes in his book, he says, not following up is the same as filling up your bathtub with water, but not putting the drain plug in. So you need to follow up. Find out what it is they liked about your service. Follow up. Now, when you follow up and you do it right, they'll come back. That's chapter 6 of Nelson's book. Follow up and do it right, they'll come back. Now, when someone comes back, it's something that piqued their interest. So what do you do with that? You find out what it is that piqued their interest, and then you explain more to them about it. And then you actually treat them the same way you did a first-time guest. You, once again, follow up within 36 hours, and then you follow up again with another handwritten note within 96 hours. Now, it's going to be a little different because now you're going to focus on what it is they liked about your organization. Nelson explains this just a little bit more, and I think that's a great chapter. Now, let's say that they come back. They were there the second time. Now they come back for the third time. They're becoming a regular attendee. Now, how do you get them to stick? How do you create sticky situations? Well, you create sticky situations through relationships. Relationships is where you do this. And so in building relationships, how do you do that? You do that through inviting them to events, to ministries, to different small groups. You invite them there and then they make friends. You guys become friends. They make friends. You start talking back and forth. You start building relationships is what you're looking for. As a matter of fact, that's what churches are about, building relationships. And that relationship should move on to engaging in a relationship with Jesus. Build that relationship first. And that's how you create sticky situations to where attendees start making a difference. Now, if you don't do this, the attendee is faced with two different roads. Nelson talks about that. One of the roads leads to relationships, building, coming in your church, doing things. And then the other road leads to, I can't make friends there. I don't know anyone. And then that leads to them no longer coming there. So they have to build a relationship, and you are a big part of that. at the church. And then, so once they build these relationships, guess what? They can start taking ownership. If you start inviting them into their ministry, into your different ministries, then guess what? They start taking ownership, and then they eventually come to full circle. So what do I mean by taking ownership? Taking ownership is the same as taking responsibility. In ministries, they start, attendees or people in different ministries, they start to take ownership when they start creating, or they start giving their ideas. They start giving their perspectives on things, and then you start incorporating some of these things in order to help them grow. They start, if they're on the hospitality where they're doing some cooking, they start coming in with food that they want to help you serve, or they start saying, hey, I'm going to help you clean up. Now they're starting to build relationships, and they're starting to do things with everyone else to where they're building and talking to different people and growing in relationships. Now they're starting to take on responsibilities, and now they're starting to be fused, there's that word again, fusion, as a part of that church. And that's what you're looking for. And of course, once they do that, they go full circle, and now they're the smiley face that your new guests are now seeing. So, in creating this book, Fusion, I think Nelson did a great job. He did a great job. And I think it's a book that you should possibly read. So, I'm Bennie Crawford. So tell me how you felt about this review by subscribing down below. And remember, if you're thinking about reading it, before you do, allow me to review it. All right, out.